As the occurrence of sexual-related crimes skyrocket, there is a need for a solution. About 1 in 4 people will experience unwanted sexual contact throughout their lifetime. Sexual assault hurts everyone and is a recurrent problem that needs to be addressed. By promoting better justice to survivors, providing every victim with a rape kit, and through releasing the true numbers about sexual assault, statistics are a few of the many ways to limit the occurrence of sexual assault. No one should ever have to be a victim of sexual assault or rape. Being a survivor of unwanted sexual contact can be traumatizing and may affect someone for the rest of their life. Many students at the University of Nebraska may be reluctant to report their stories of sexual abuse since there may have been drugs and alcohol involved if they were underage. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln grants victims who are under the influence amnesty for recollecting their painful experience, and they dismiss any minor in possession charges. Granting amnesty to students is a university policy since the university decided that controlled substances, like alcohol, are often an element of alleged sexual misconduct in college settings. So that was reported by Boom and Hansen in the Nebraska Journals in 2020. So substances, when used safely, like alcohol, allow for social settings to be enjoyable, and it could even relieve some anxiety for some users. Attackers have the capability to take the fun out of drinking and use it in unsafe amounts to their advantage to strike victims, and a good majority of attacks happen on college campuses. Those in charge at college campuses nationwide, including the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, recognize that they cannot fine minors who were assaulted for underage drinking since it would count as victim blaming, so amnesty became a policy. Attackers are prosecuted for their crimes through medical examiners who study DNA found on victims. Non-stop stories in the media about untested rape kits and dismissed rape allegations makes victims less likely to want to come forward about their sexual misconduct experiences. Sexual assault includes the victim's body, which is also a part of the crime scene. After reporting their assault to a police officer or doctor, they can have a swab test performed on them to search for DNA the attacker may have left on them. The test takes about 4 to 6 hours to complete, and it's a very powerful tool that is not used enough. So although the process sounds really easy, hundreds of thousands of rape kits sit untested in police department and crime lab storage facilities across the country. That was found by Hargitay 2020 and the backlog. So talking about backlog, there are two main elements to the backlog. The first part of the backlog is when kits are booked into evidence, but they're not tested for evidence. And the second part to the backlog is when the kits are submitted for testing and they have not been tested for 30 days or more, which invalidates them. So crime labs should commit to testing rape kits in a timely manner and bring justice to those who have made the choice to submit them. Serial offenders can be identified through rape kits, and it is a helpful tactic that is not used as much as it could be. People may be misguided in their belief that once rape kits are submitted, it will often lead to identifying the perpetrator in no time. When the National Institute of Justice led a research project in Detroit to explore the backlog, they found that 28% of the DNA tested matched another test result, and it was used to identify 170 serial assaulters. That was found by Currington 2021 and the Little Rock research project. It is unfortunate that even with the rising issue of sexual assault, that rape kits go untested and they are not put to their full use. There is little that can be done for the backlog crisis since rape kits can average between $1,000 to $5,000 each, but funds are being allocated so the backlog can be ended. If rape kits were to be more frequently utilized and tested more often, crimes like sexual assault and rape would become less of an occurrence because the perpetrators of the crime would be worried about their DNA being caught.
Continuing on the topic of being a young adult in college, it can be noted that rape culture is alive and well on college campuses. I chose two different definitions of rape culture due to the fact that there are two very important points that each of these definitions makes. First, I chose from the Oxford Dictionary, where they define rape culture as a society or environment whose prevailing societal attitudes have the effect of normalizing or trivializing sexual assault and abuse. To roughly translate, rape culture is society's normalization around rape and rape topics. The other definition I pulled was from Wikipedia, which touches on another important aspect around this culture. Rape culture is a sociological theory of a setting in which rape is pervasive and normalized due to societal attitudes about gender and sexuality. Specifically, I wanted to highlight the societal attitudes about gender and sexuality. Perceptions of gender and sexuality have a large part of the survival of rape culture. These two definitions point out that rape culture is made up of a normalization of rape and different stigmas around gender and sexuality. Most of us are familiar with social media's impact on every aspect of our lives, and that can be said for rape culture as well. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, or RAIN, has resources for victims and the general public to learn about these topics. One particular article that was released recently, which features the CEO, Julie Smolensky, featured a quote that I thought was really important. In quotes, "We need the media to stop glamorizing violence, especially against women. Media creates consciousness." When she said this, it's pretty clear that that's true. Knowing that media is woven into most parts of our generation's lives, it proves that when media glorifies sexual violence, it adds fuel to rape culture.
On average, there are 463,634 victims of rape and sexual assault each year in the United States, and less than 1% of those ever lead to a felony conviction, and only 14 to 18% of those sexual assaults ultimately get prosecuted. Me, personally, I see this to be true. Just in the last year, one of my peers' assailant was found not guilty to charges of sexual assault, even with several other young girls making accusations against him. This is something that needs to be paid more attention to, and we need to take action to help give justice to the survivors, because as you may think, it might not affect you. Down the road, it could affect you or someone you love, and at that point, it may be too late to put a stop to it. There are many other factors that could influence a sexual assault case to not make it to the criminal justice system, and I think one of the big ones is the victims of sexual assault are scared. For example, according to Rachel Lavelle, a research assistant professor at Case Western University, she stated, "Rape is traumatic, but the victims also find that participating in the criminal justice system can also be very traumatic. So many times, a victim would rather not participate in the bureaucratic burden involved with moving their case to justice. Assailants are walking free because of the fears associated with speaking up." Another reason that rape and sexual assault cases often don't lead to a conviction is because of the lengthy process of collecting evidence and the testing to obtain that evidence. And often there isn't enough evidence to make a conviction. Oftentimes survivors may not come out right away and report what has happened to them. An article published by Joanne Archambault stated, "Most communities continue to use a 72-hour rule so that forensic examinations are authorized. This means after a 72-hour time period, a survivor of sexual assault may not even be able to get the evidence to help them charge their assailant. Without this evidence, it makes it so much harder to get the justice the survivor deserves." There have been many flaws exposed in the criminal justice system surrounding sexual assault and rape cases over the years, and there have been steps to improve it, but there needs to be more action taken. The biggest thing is standing with the survivors of sexual assault. Coming out about something like this is an extremely difficult thing for anyone to do, but the survivor has to relive some of their worst moments of their life, and if they don't have people standing by their side, it makes it so much harder to do so. Even then, prosecutors often examine the credibility of their survivor, and the pressures on them often lead to them withdrawing their complaint, and this affects whether their rapist or assailant gets charged after all. Another thing is getting legislation to improve policies on how to handle sexual crimes. As of now, there are states that have passed a sexual assault victims' Bill of Rights that are similar to the 2016 federal law. This is according to Annie Teagan with the NCLS. There are so many things that have been done to combat sexual assault and rape, but even today, many survivors don't get the justice they deserve, and their assailant is still walking free.
According to BSC's Women's Health 2021, many sexual assault cases are not believed by law enforcement. Victims have experienced such negative experiences while reporting the crime that they have experienced secondary victimization trauma. According to a study done by BMC Women's Health, they experience 3 different types of trauma. First, they experience a loss of self. Second, they have cumulative health and social side effects. And third, they have broken expectations that result in a loss of trust and secondary victimization. These findings proved that not being believed by law enforcement contributed to further social and mental burdens beyond sexual assault. Many survivors have turned to drugs and alcohol after reporting to law enforcement due to further victimization when they needed the support. There is a high rate of sexual assault in North America. 1 in 3 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime in North America. It does not matter what age, status, ability, race, or gender, it can happen in any environment. In North America, it has been criticized how law enforcement will victim blame and stereotype their victims. This results in rape myths that women will lie about the sexual assault, and it only happens to women who live risky and loose lives. Over 40 years of study done by the Sexual Assault by the Clinical Psychology Review 2018 shows severe impact on psychopathy. Sexual assault cases experience post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a severe mental health disorder. But the study also found other side effects. The study also found victims were suicidal. Women have expressed severe fear, anxiety, and depression in phases after being sexually assaulted. Over time, survivors endure nightmares, physical stomach pain, constant muscle tension, self-blame, and phobic reactions to trauma triggers that remind them of the event. According to the impact trauma in adult sexual assault victims, the sexualized nature of the violation of sexual assault adds to a specific aspect of the traumatic experience. In fact, it is proven that being sexually assaulted is the most traumatic experience that a woman can go through in her life, especially when the woman knows her offender. The victim will experience shock, anger, anxiety, fear, hypervigilance, hyperalertness, irritability, nightmares, disrupted sleep, ruminating thoughts, reliving responses, increased need for control, deny the experience, isolate themselves, feeling detached from others, constricting emotions, feeling betrayed and ashamed. When the victim knows and trusts the offender, they will experience an extreme sense of betrayal, and the trauma will compound. This will also compound her self-blame and also the ability to disclose what happened, because she will either previously or still care about the person who did this to her. Several studies have suggested that the victim fears of being physically harmed or even killed during the assault when it is happening, even when a weapon is not present. This fear of death can cause severe complications to the mental psyche. Though we cannot predict how someone will respond to sexual assault, there are common symptoms. The victim tends to freeze, not report or delay the report of the assault, not remember all aspects of the event, have blanks in their memory, have an inconsistent memory, and struggle with decision making, not say no to clearly unwanted sexual contact after, and exhibit no physical injury, be able to identify the perpetrator by police, they blame themselves, have a relationship with the perpetrator after the assault, and deny or minimize the assault. The aftermath of trauma is complex and compiled for ways the victim can survive. Though the victim may make statements that are inconsistent, it needs to be understood that this is part of the process and it is typical and normal. It is a way for the brain to process and cope the overwhelming and psychological events that the victim has experienced.
I'm sure we all have our experience somewhere on the spectrum where we've dealt with rape culture, whether that's from jokes to harassment. I noticed an unusual example of rape culture the other day when I was speaking with a couple of my classmates. While I was in this conversation, they brought up one of our mutual male friends and started speaking about him in a highly sexual way. At first, I thought that was really weird, especially since I've been friends with him for over 3 years. However, after thinking back to that conversation, I realized that they were highly sexualizing a man in ways that are beyond inappropriate in general, let alone speaking about them in a public setting where we have other classmates that can hear. As a friend of this, it bewildered me that people could talk about someone like that. Furthermore, this man is not someone who is open about his intimate relationships or anything like that. He's a textbook example of a gentleman, someone who shows respect and is very intentional about that to everyone, but especially women. The fact that these women were speaking so freely about a man's sexuality initiated my thought process around how sex is spoken about freely in everyday life, and this not only confirms that rape culture is relevant, but it brings up the question is about how it affects men with its sexual assault. Clearly, it's a myth that women have no part in supporting rape culture, and it's a myth that men can't be victims of sexual assault and rape. Society and gender play a role in even the areas where rape is taken seriously. In a case study done in Georgia, Clayton Bullock inquired about the programs available for male victims of sexual assault. He did a bunch of calls, and of the 30, and in quotes, of the 30 agencies that participated in an in-depth interview, 11 indicated they did not provide services to males, 10 were theoretically able to service males but never had done so, 5 had dealt with at least one male in the past, and 19 were amenable to providing such services, but only 4 of them had done so in the past year. Some of the feedback he received was as follows. Many believed that men couldn't be raped or that they were raped only because they wanted to be. One law enforcement representative bluntly said, "We don't do men. Why would you want to study something like that? Men can't be raped." Other respondents indicated that they did not treat men because so few get raped. These interactions indicate that rape culture is deeply rooted in society's existing biases about gender and sexuality.
With the dangers of sexual assault comes a lot of startling statistics, especially on college campuses. Unfortunately, it happens more than most people are aware of, and it just goes unreported by the university. According to a study from PLOS ONE, however, 1/5, 21% of women who took the survey as freshmen had experienced unwanted sexual contact, compared to 36.4% over 3 years, suggesting that others have found the risk of assault as high as freshman year. Freshmen are vulnerable and experiencing a new environment on a college campus, so perpetrators see them as an easy target. They're more at risk than juniors or seniors, and a longitudinal study on undergraduates also found between 8% and 11% of women experienced rape in each semester during their first year of college, which is hypothesized to be a time of increased vulnerability to sexual violence. It's unfortunate that being a freshman on college comes with fear of being assaulted, while young adults should be more excited and focusing on beginning their new journey as they start college. Along with that, there is a lot of stigma around men getting sexually assaulted, but it does happen. According to a study, among men, 1 in 8 indicated that they have been sexually assaulted since starting CU, and 1 in 16 men in general are assaulted on college campuses. There is a stigma around sexual assault, especially on college-aged men. They're supposed to be manly, and it should not be possible for a man to be sexually assaulted. Obviously, that is not true. It's just unfortunate that most men do not report it because they feel that their situation has been invalidated by society, or they feel like they weren't sexually assaulted. There is a lot more sexual assault that occurs on college campus that many people do not know about, which is why it is important to encourage victims to speak up and create change and hold universities accountable. In order to make college campuses a safer place, change needs to be implemented. According to the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape, college discipline boards associated with sexual assault were created to promote gender equity in education as guaranteed under the Title IX of the Civil Rights Act. Federal laws require that schools appropriately address sexual assault in order to ensure equal access to education.
While universities should disclose sexual assaults that have occurred on campus, they do not always handle the situation correctly. Students need to be made aware of Title IX so they can hold their universities accountable in the case they protect the perpetrator. It has happened too many times where universities do not hold assaulters accountable when it's someone high profile, such as an athlete. Someone's status does not make them immune to the law, and raising awareness is not enough. 90% of assaults on college campuses go unreported, so standing by victims and encouraging them to come forward through a support system can also help immensely in creating change on campuses. Universities should also implement mandatory programs for students that educate them on consent. Students should not have to be taught how to avoid sexual assault. Rather, they should just initially be taught on how to not sexually assault other people. Overall, sexual assault can happen anywhere, not just on college campuses. Any form of sexual assault can psychologically damage a person and leave them with trauma that lasts a lifetime. Victims should be supported, and abusers should be held accountable and reap consequences of their actions. Prevention methods should be taken seriously, and every person should be well educated on consent. The more people that take consent seriously, the closer we get to a brighter future without sexual assault at all.